Just when you think the New York Mets are going to get swept, Brandon Nimmo saves the day.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use the code, all in lowercase, LockedOnMLB, for a first deposit match up to $100. It was a pretty brutal weekend of baseball for the Mets going up against the Atlanta Braves. They just could not score for a majority of this series. If it was not for Brandon Nimmo, they would have got swept. But boy, did Brandon Nimmo deliver. We saw him leave Saturday's game with an intercostal muscle strain. Weren't sure how serious it was. He said after Saturday's game that it felt like a day-to-day thing. They caught it early. They were just being cautious. And he campaigned to play on Sunday. We've heard this story before now, haven't we? Lindor one time, Pete Alonso another time this year, now Nimmo. And I think this is a little strategy from Carlos Mendoza. Now, let's give our star players half a game off after that fifth inning. You're going to be good to go. And we see Nimmo in the seventh inning on Sunday as a pinch runner for DJ Stewart. So the thought was, all right, let him run the bases, let him go play some outfield. But is he ever going to come up to bat? And he did make a fantastic catch in the outfield, actually a couple, but one in particular where he crashed into the wall and thought, all right, I guess Nimmo's okay. Then in the bottom of the ninth inning, after Jeff McNeil gets on, with the Mets trailing by one, he delivers the monster walk-off home run. And we're going to talk a lot about Brandon Nimmo in the next segment because this offseason, I had made the proclamation in one of these shows that Brandon Nimmo is the Mets' best hitter. And boy, is he proving that to be the case because the numbers behind what Nimmo has done this year, his actual stats are okay. But if you really look at the batted ball data, this guy has just turned himself into such a all-around fantastic hitter and just a great building block, a great franchise cornerstone for this Mets team. So we're going to gush about Nimmo some more, but I want to recap the whole series. And I did already break down Friday night's game. I had a Saturday show. So if you want a little more of an in-depth breakdown of what happened there, you can go back and watch that episode. But essentially, the Mets got burned with one bad inning by Jose Quintana, where he gave up 3 home runs in the span of 4 batters. And they couldn't score. Charlie Morton, AJ Minter, Raisel Iglesias nearly blanked the Mets. They just couldn't get anything going. Saturday was even worse. I should even, you know what? I'll retract there. They didn't nearly blank the Mets. That's what happened on Saturday. But it still just felt like they just could never catch the Braves once they got those 4 runs. Saturday, we got to see Christian Scott make his second turn in the rotation. I thought he was really impressive. You could say he made one mistake in this start, a 2-run homer off the bat of Orlando Arcia, but you watch that replay again, Tomas Nido is setting up on the inner half, and clearly the call was a fastball, and it wasn't even over the heart of the plate. He didn't even miss a spot. If anything, he missed inside, which is where you'd want to miss, but Orlando Arcia just was sitting fastball, ready to ambush it, and he did, and he pulled one and kept it just fair down the left field line. So that was the biggest mistake. And again, I put some quotes around mistake by Scott in that start, giving up that home run. Other than that, though, 6 hits allowed, 3 runs against a really good team, walked 2, struck out 8, and he only needed 83 pitches to get through 6 innings. Now, the Mets sent him back out for the 7th, which I didn't necessarily love, because, again, I don't know how they're managing him. I don't know if there's an innings limit, pitch limit, whatever it is. I got that the pitch count was tidy, but I thought, all right, he got through 6. Why sort of push the envelope? But, hey, I also do credit Mendoza at the same time for having the faith in Christian Scott to do that. But as soon as he walked the first guy, I would have pulled him because he was missing the strike zone, looked like he was gassed. He ends up giving up a hit and puts 2 runners on before they pull him. It doesn't end up reflecting on his ERA because Sean Reed-Foley did a great job coming out of the bullpen. He got 3 ground balls. One of them, Francisco Lindor, when they were playing in, just, man, brutal play. He had a couple rough plays this week, and this one where it just ate him up, and luckily a run didn't come in. Stayed in the infield. Everybody stay where they're at, and the runner got to first base. It loaded the bases. But there was that play. There was also another play this weekend where I think it was Pete Alonso who made the turn, and Lindor just didn't catch it. Just couldn't catch the ball at second. That was pretty bad. But Sean Reed-Foley gets a double play ball, not even a double play ball, a double play line drive. Jeff McNeil has his glove taken off. I can't remember if it was a line drive or a one hop shot, but regardless, it was drilled at Jeff McNeil. Took his glove off. He fields it quickly, does like a shovel toss to Lindor. That time he came up cleanly, turns a double play. So that was a really nice play in that second game that prevented what could have been a much worse inning. And Sean Reed-Foley stayed on, pitched another scoreless one. So SRF did a really nice job in that outing, but really the overall story of the game was, again, Braves pitching. And yes, we could all say, oh, it's Mets hitting, but man, Max Fried was brilliant. And he's looking like ace, top tier Max Fried. He no-hit the Mets and then, didn't get the opportunity to complete it, but through 7, had a no-hitter. And the Mets were 1 out away, or I should say the Braves were 1 out away from completing a no-hitter until JD Martinez came through and hit a home run, which was great because you never want to see your team no-hit. They got a couple more base runners on after that, but they couldn't do much with it. Still, it was a bad showing by the Mets offense, but one where, again, you can look at the guys that pitched for the Braves, Max Fried, Joe Jimenez, and Raisel Iglesias, all these guys. Well, Max Fried, like I said, he was brilliant. And then you look at Jimenez and Iglesias, these guys have put up great numbers all year. These are some really good relief pitchers. It's tough. The Braves have a really good staff. And even Bryce Elder on Sunday, he, with his sinker, was just carving through the Mets and was hitting his spots and throwing the ball really well. So at some point, you do have to tip your cap to the competition. And I think this stretch for the Mets may really prove, between playing the Braves for these 3 and what we're about to watch against the Phillies, that they're just not at the same level as these teams. And we sort of know that, right? I think the Mets can still stay in the race this year if they can do their job beating up the bad teams that they will eventually play. And the schedule does get lighter throughout the season. This team could hang in the race and we could have a really fun year. But there's a level those teams are at that I just don't think the Mets can really get to. We'll see, though. You never know. If this lineup can eventually click and start to hit the great pitching, it'll be a different conversation as the year wears on. But that's really the story for me for this weekend. Yes, the Mets didn't hit, but the Braves, they threw the ball really well. And you have to credit the Mets for fighting tooth and nail on Sunday to grab a win. Luis Severino, you're going to look at the line. You're going to say 5 innings pitched. He didn't get deep into that game, but I still thought he threw the ball well. First inning, he pitches himself into and out of a jam, but a huge strikeout, the bases loaded, where he just threw a fastball by Michael Harris in the zone. But, I mean, he just, here's my best, you try to hit it, and pitches himself out of a jam, gives up a solo homer to Jared Kelenic. You knew he was going to get the Mets at some point this year. And then the Mets came right back, though. Third inning, DJ Stewart, Francisco Lindor, and Pete Alonso all get base hits. Alonso drives in Stewart with his single. Alonso was 2 for 4 in the day, and he should have gone 3 for 4. The first inning, he ripped a hot shot to Austin Riley. Expected batting average on that ball of 470. Ridiculous play by Austin Riley on one hop. Somehow gets it, throws out Pete. But Pete's starting to come around, so that's good to see. And then back to Severino. Ran a high pitch count, gave up 4 hits, walked 3. The last walk was the killer, and that was a leadoff walk to Zach Short in the 6th. That's right. Zach Short's a Brave now. Had a pit stop in Boston. Now he has taken Louis Guillorme's spot in Atlanta. And that makes me nervous because I did not like the way the Mets managed Zach Short. I thought that they should have given him that job and DFA Joey Wendell, because when you look at what he did in spring training, there was a swing adjustment. There was something there. And now I'm nervous that the Braves are going to unlock it. Granted, he's still hitting like 100 this year, and he's had sporadic playing time. He's on his third team this season. You can't walk him to lead off innings, and it killed them twice because happens in the sixth. Matt Olson ends up getting a hit as well off of Severino, and then Marcell Ozuna cashes in short off of Reed Garrett with a base hit when Garrett came in to relieve Sevy. Granted, after that, Garrett shut the door. 3 straight strikeouts to pitch out of a jam where there was 2 runners on. So that was huge to keep the game close. Then he works a scoreless 7th, including a pickoff of Ronald Acuna Jr., who Luis Severino also picked off. So good to see the stolen base king get nabbed a couple times by the Mets. That's the move, guys. Just pick them off first, and then they can't steal second. Let's just start doing that. But again, going back to short, he has a leadoff walk in the sixth. He had one in the sixth too. Not an incorrect statement, but I just said that. He has a leadoff walk in the 8th also. And again, it's Ozuna that cashes him in. That all came off of Adam Ottavino. Jake Diekman came in and pitched the Mets out of the jam, but I put some quotes around pitched because there's a lot of hard hit balls in that inning that just ended up in Mets gloves. So they got kind of lucky in that 8th. Edwin Diaz keeps the game close in the 9th. And then, as we already mentioned, Brandon Nimmo comes through. Jeff McNeil bunt base hit. For all you Locked On Mets insiders that are checking back at home, that's our texting service. And there's a giveaway going on for you guys where you had to predict how many hits he's going to have in this homestand. 1 hit, a bunt hit for McNeil in this series. We had one insider predict in a 5-game homestand that Jeff McNeil would have 2 hits. He was the only one that predicted that. And he's sitting pretty with 2 games left. Kind of funny how that worked out. But Brandon Nimmo is the guy that comes through when the Mets are this close to getting swept. So we got to talk about Nimmo a little bit more in the next segment here because he is looking fantastic to start the year. And if you look at the numbers behind everything, he's actually been even better than what his borderline or his surface stats, I should say, would suggest. So I want to talk about those numbers in just a minute. First, though, today's episode is brought to you by Policygenius. You never know what can happen in life. That is why it's always best to be prepared and make sure your family is taken care of. This is why everyone should have life insurance, but sometimes finding the right policy is not easy and can be really time consuming and even overwhelming. This is where Policygenius comes in. Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace that will save you time and money so you can provide your family with a financial safety net. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. Policygenius helps you compare quotes from America's top insurers in just a few clicks to find your lowest price, and their team of licensed experts is on hand to help talk you through it with no incentive to recommend one insurer over another so you can trust their guidance. Check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com/LockedOnMLB or click the link in the episode description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you can save. That's policygenius.com/LockedOnMLB. So Brandon Nimmo is the best hitter on the New York Mets. This was, I believe, I can't remember the exact framing of the episode where we talked about this offseason. It might have been when I was ranking the top 10 players on the Mets, or I think it might have been because I think I had Nimmo above Francisco Lindor. I had him below Lindor because Lindor is the better. No. So Brandon Nimmo is the best hitter on the New York Mets. This is something we talked about this offseason. I believe you can go back, and I think it was when I ranked the top 10 players on the Mets right now. And this is off the top of my head, but I believe I had Lindor 1 and Nimmo 2. And I think a big part of my rankings was having Nimmo above Alonso. And part of that was the fact that Nimmo brings defensive value that Alonso does not. And the reason why I had Lindor over Nimmo was because of the all-encompassing value that he brings, stealing bases defensively, also with the bat. But if I'm not mistaken, that was the episode where I said Nimmo has been the Mets' best and most consistent hitter. He just gives you the best at-bats. It's really that simple. And you look at his season overall right now, and you say, all right, he's in 234, Ryan. Why Why are you pumping him up so much right now just because he hit a walk-off homer? But you look a little bit more into it. 379 on base. That's really good. You get on base at a 380 clip. That'll play. 431 slug. That's another number where you say, okay, well, how good is he really? He's not even slugging 500. He was an elite hitter. He'd be slugging 500. So that OPS, instead of being 810, will be closer to 900 because that's the elite hitters. And I'm about to tell you that Brandon Nimmo is an elite hitter, like one of the best hitters in all of baseball, elite. So here's the numbers behind it, right? There's a stat called xwOBA, that is expected weighted on base average. First, let me explain wOBA before we get to xwOBA. So wOBA is weighted on base average, which accounts for how a player reaches base instead of simply considering whether they reach base. Okay, so a walk is great, but a single is a little bit better because you can drive in runs. Doubles, triples, home runs, those are all better than simply getting on base via a walk or even a single. Luis Arraez has a 329 wOBA. Funny enough, he has a 329 xwOBA, so that just tells you that he's not driving the baseball, but he has an on-base percentage of 354. The reason why his wOBA is low is because he doesn't really hit for much other than hustle doubles and singles. He's not driving a lot of home runs, so that's why his wOBA is low. So now we get to expected wOBA. So this is formulated using exit velocity, launch angle, and on certain types of batted ball, sprint speed. So if a guy has sprint speed and he hits a dribbler, he's going to get credited more than if Pete Alonso hit the dribbler. Okay, but even further than this is removing defense from the equation, right? So in the same way that expected batting average or expected slug is removing defense, and this is comparing StatCast data. So it's looking at the probability based on all of the data they have since 2015 when StatCast came into play. So when a ball is hit that way, with that launch angle, in that direction, with that exit velocity, it's expected to be a home run this amount of times or a triple. Bottom line, if you want to just cut through all of the explanation, this is a statistic that is the best predictor for how good a hitter is. It's that simple. You look at this stat and it will tell you, if you look at the top 10, these are the best 10 hitters in baseball right now based on how they're hitting the baseball. This is straight from MLB.com. They say xwOBA is more indicative of a player's skill than regular wOBA, as xwOBA removes defense from the equation. And it talks about hitters and pitchers, how they're able to influence exit velocity and launch angle, but have no control on what happens to a batted ball once it's put in play. So I say all of that to tell you that Brandon Nimmo has an xwOBA of 426. Now that was prior to the home run tonight. So it's going to go up. That puts him in the 98th percentile in Major League Baseball. And the hitters ahead of Brandon Nimmo, you have Shohei Ohtani. Duh. Okay. You believe in the stat a little bit more when you see that it's Shohei Ohtani, Marcell Ozuna, and Juan Soto as the top three in xwOBA this year. And you can definitely make the argument they've been the best three hitters in baseball. You then have Ryan O'Hearn at number 4. He's hitting 292 for the Orioles, 382 on base, 899 slug. Numbers probably suggest he's actually a little bit better if you look at the xwOBA. Then you have Kyle Tucker, who's kind of like Brandon Nimmo, a guy that is underrated because people don't talk about him nearly enough, but one of the best hitters or just best players in all of baseball. Then you get to Brandon Nimmo. Brandon Nimmo has a better xwOBA than Mookie Betts, than Mike Trout. Obviously, Trout's hurt, but Trout was impacting the ball pretty good, leading the league in home runs before he went down. Better than Bobby Witt Jr., William Contreras, some of the best hitters in baseball. Nimmo's xwOBA is better. His hard hit percentage last year was 47.9%. Why he hit all those home runs? He was hitting the ball harder. This year it's up to 51%. Again, all of these stats do not account for tonight's home run. His slugging percentage, I mentioned, it was 431. His expected slugging percentage, 558. He's hitting 234. His expected batting average is 296. Average exit velocity, 92.9 miles per hour. He's among the league leaders there. Last year, he set a career high with a 9.5% barrel rate. This year, it's up to 13.7%. Brandon Nimmo is a great hitter, and he has gotten unlucky this year, and the luck is starting to turn. You look at his stats in April. He hit 226, 390 on base, 387 slug. So I just mentioned the expected average, expected slug are better than what he's produced. There was a lot of hard hit balls that turned into outs in April. But he also, by the way, I should mention, was 1 for 13 in March against the Brewers in that one series. Now, in 10 games in May, he's hitting 323, 447 on base, 710 slug. He has 3 home runs in his last 15 at-bats. He has driven in 27 runs from the leadoff spot from the Mets. He is leading the team in RBIs. His walk rate at 15.4% is better than it's been in years since he started to add some power in 2022. This is by far his best walk rate. His walk rate has hovered around 10%. He's walking more. Now, you look at how Brandon Nimmo has gotten this good. He's just a meticulous worker. He is taking all of the data, all of the things that the Mets are providing him, and he gets better year over year over year. The way that he's learned how to trust his body, or even not even trust, protect his body. Old Brandon Nimmo feels something in the whatever inning it was, the 5th inning. I think it might have been the 3rd inning on Saturday. He felt something on a swing. He went out and he played some left field. Said it was still tight on him, and so he came in, talked to the trainers, got himself out of the game. Old Brandon Nimmo plays through that, and in the 7th inning, he pulls an oblique. It was an intercostal strain, whatever. He pulls that muscle. He pulls something on his side, and he's out for 6 to 8 weeks. And he even said that's one of those things where if you go into it and you play through it, it might be 6 to 8 weeks. I decided that it was best to pull myself from the game, essentially. And then he works meticulously to get treatment on it, and he's good to go, and he's swinging the bat great, and here he is, hits a home run. Brandon Nimmo, from where he started, where everyone thought he was a 4th outfielder, the fact that we're going to trade him for Jay Bruce once upon a time, to being a guy that has stayed in this Mets uniform the whole time, has signed an 8-year contract extension. He is, if you had to predict right now, who is the most likely Met to have his jersey number retired next, you could say, okay, well, Jacob deGrom, and this is as far as after Strawberry, Carlos Beltran, whatever. You could talk about guys that aren't playing for the Mets anymore. David Wright, of course. But if you look at current Mets, you say, who's the most likely to have his number retired? It's number 9, Brandon Nimmo, because he's homegrown and he's going to be here for a long time. And I think he's going to continue to improve. I think he's hitting 30 home runs this season with the way he's impacting the baseball. And damn it if he shouldn't be an all-star finally, because he still hasn't had that achievement on his record. But this guy has gotten so good. And one last little tidbit before I move on and stop gushing. He was on Mookie Betts' podcast back when they played the Dodgers that weekend that they were in LA. And he was talking about how hard it is to play baseball and the mental side of things. And he was mentioning, he said, yeah, you might only get 2 hits in the span of 10 plate appearances. He's like, but if you walk twice and you hit the ball hard for 3 of your outs, or I think he might have said walk 3 times, regardless of the exact total. He basically said, if you walk, if you're hitting the ball hard for some of your outs, he said, now you have to just reframe how you're looking at it and say, all right, well, I was successful in 7 out of 10 at-bats because I got a couple hits, but also I hit the ball hard. I drew my walks. He talked about just trying to win each at-bat. And you see that with the way he approaches the game. And that's why he used to get so fired up, and he still does in some respects. Not quite like he did when he was first coming up when he drew walks, but still, because for him, that's winning the at-bat. He has just gotten so good. And even seeing the way he's taken to left field this year, the defensive metrics aren't saying he's elite out there by any stretch, but I mean, you saw him come into a game cold tonight and make a great catch going up against the wall. Brandon Nimmo has just turned himself into a really good baseball player and a guy that I think is definitely getting the appreciation from Mets fans now, but he deserves all of it and more so because it's been a long journey for him from a first-round pick who needed a ton of work, a really raw first-round pick, to getting up, to becoming a starter, to dealing with injuries, to now at this point where he's the Mets' best hitter. And the more I think about it, the more you look at the numbers, it's not even close. I mean, yeah, Pete Alonso is the best power hitter. Francisco Lindor can be really good, but Brandon Nimmo is the best hitter on the New York Mets. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. Before we close the show, though, I want to talk about the road ahead. The Mets are about to face the Phillies in a very strange series. Is it a 2-game series? Is it a 4-game series? We're going to talk about it in just a minute. First, though, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It is the easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less than on 2 or more player stats and watch the winnings roll in. You can take your favorite players from the diamond, put them in your Prize Picks entry, whether it's strikeouts, RBIs, first inning runs, hits. You just take your pick of more or less and then add them to your Prize Picks entry. You can also look at players in the NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs, add them into that entry as well. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what makes Prize Picks the #1 fantasy sports app. Prize Picks also offers weekly promotions and special offers for the biggest moments in sports. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with Prize Picks. So what do we call this upcoming series against the Phillies? I think personally I'm looking at it as a 4-game set. I'm not sure how the broadcast booth is going to call it, but they're playing 2 games at Citi Field and 2 games at Citizens Bank. It's 4 games back to back to back to back against the Phillies. To me, that's a 4-game set. I'm excited to see that sort of home and home action. That's going to be kind of cool, but I don't know if I'm excited to watch this series because the Phillies are playing great baseball. They're 28-13. They're 8-2 in their last 10, and they nearly swept the Marlins this weekend. They lost in extra innings, but it was a close one. They have one of the best offenses in baseball, maybe even the best offense in the National League. Probably them or the Dodgers or the Braves, but they're 5th in home runs in Major League Baseball. They're 2nd in OPS and in runs scored. They're 4th in team ERA, and they lead the National League in strikeouts. Their bullpen has not been great, but you can absolutely make the argument, and I probably would, that they had the best starting rotation in all of baseball. They definitely have the best rotation in the National League right now. The Mets are lucky because Zach Wheeler started on Sunday, so we don't have to watch Zach Wheeler pitch against the Mets in this series, but you still are going to have to face Aaron Nola and Ranger Suarez. The first starter up is going to be Christopher Sanchez, who's throwing the ball really well this year, 3.22 ERA. Sean Manaea going up against him in Game 1. Game 2, Aaron Nola versus Jose Budo. Nola with a 3.67. Sneakily been their worst pitcher this year. That's before Taijuan Walker got back in the rotation, but Spencer Turnbull was great before they inserted Walker and his contract back in that rotation. And the Mets will see Walker on Thursday. 4.82 ERA in the season for Walker. So that'll be the one matchup that the Mets should hopefully put up a bunch of runs. And then Wednesday, I know I did that out of order, but Wednesday, you got Ranger Suarez, who's 7-0 with a 1.50 ERA. So it's Sanchez, Nola, Suarez, Walker. Okay, that's the lineup for the Phillies. For the Mets, though, it's Sean Manaea, Jose Budo, and then some question marks. We don't know who's going to pitch in this series, and that's really what I want to get into here. Tyler McGill did get one more rehab start. We've been talking about this. Wasn't sure if they were going to insert him into the rotation on Wednesday or Thursday. This takes him off the table for the Phillies series. Earliest he could get back into the rotations on Friday against the Marlins. Now, McGill, in his last rehab start in Syracuse on Sunday, looked pretty good. Scattered 7 hits across 5 1/3. Danny Young did pick him up, though, stranding 2 of those hits in the 6th inning. McGill, 74 pitches, 55 were strikes, 6 strikeouts, no walks. He's looked really good. And I believe he should be in this rotation very soon. But how are they going to make that happen? You could just go with a 5-man rotation for now. That's the simplest thing as far as just this series goes. So Quintana on regular rest on Wednesday, Christian Scott, regular rest on Thursday. Probably your best bet to try to win this series. So I'd say that's the most likely move, but I also don't know if the Mets want Christian Scott starting every 5 days. He did it once in the minor leagues prior to getting called up. I think that was sort of a test case to prove that he can do it. And so it would make sense to have Christian Scott start what could potentially be a chance to win a series or to preserve a series split, or who even knows if it goes really bad, to avoid getting swept by the Phillies. it makes the most sense to have Scott go. But you could protect him a little bit, and you're coming to Miami, where it'd be a hometown start for him in front of friends and family. I don't know if the Mets are going to use that to weigh into their decision at all, but it would be a nice gesture for them to do that. Again, I I don't think that's ultimately what happens. Although part of me would like for that to happen because I'm here in South Florida and I'd love to go watch Christian Scott pitch on Friday. But it's more about, are you trying to protect him or not? And I just don't know how they're managing this kid. And that's why it's up for debate what's going to happen here. Here are the other options if you don't want to start Christian Scott on regular rest. You can go to Joey Lucchesi for a spot start. He's due to pitch on Tuesday. So we'll see if he pitches in Syracuse, or if he doesn't, we'll wonder. Because the Mets could call him up for the Wednesday start. They could DFA Yohan Ramirez. They could have Lucchesi as a placeholder in Tyler McGill's rotation, place. I mean, they could even hold it off a little bit if they wanted to, and maybe insert McGill in the rotation a little bit later down the line and have more pitchers in their bullpen for this stretch. It's a way that they could maneuver this, or they'd have more fresh arms, where you slide Lucchesi into the rotation for Wednesday. You pitch Quintana on an extra day's rest on Thursday. The problem there, you're starting back-to-back lefties, and the splits are pretty even for the Phillies, so it's not like they are worse against left-handed pitching or right-handed pitching. It's pretty much the same thing. But you slide Lucchesi in for a spot start, you then add another reliever back to the bullpen, and you kick the can down the road a little bit as far as going to a six-man rotation. I don't know when McGill would pitch again, how that would all work, but again, it would give you some time. And then it would be Quintana Thursday, Scott Friday. The other option, you hold McGill, and maybe he gets one more rehab start. I don't know. But if you really don't want to pitch Christian Scott and you don't have another option, you go to Adrian Hauser on a spot start against the Phillies, though. So I'd hope they don't do that. But those are sort of the options we're going to see. It's either going to be Quintana and Scott to close out this series, Lucchesi and Quintana, or it's going to be Quintana and Hauser. We'll see what they do. We will see how the Mets ultimately try to navigate this thing. I think they're going to wait. Okay, they're going to wait. See what happens on Monday. You have more information. If they start Joey Lucchesi on Tuesday, all right, well, that takes that one off the cards, and then they'll wait, and we'll just see exactly what they want to do here. But that's kind of the most fascinating wrinkle into this series. Is who is going to pitch in Philly. That's the other part, man. It's in Philly. Kind of a rough environment. Whoever you put out there, I don't necessarily love anyone pitching there. Even Christian Scott, a fly ball pitcher in that ballpark, that's not great. So we'll see. We'll see how they ultimately decide to navigate it. Last little quick note, and we're going to spend more time on this throughout the week. I'm going to try to get some data on Ryan Clifford from my boy RM Layton over at Just Baseball, see if he can give me some of that minor league information on what's been going on with Ryan Clifford, because I was very surprised that the Mets promoted him up to Binghamton, because we've talked about him on Friday's show, walking a ton, striking out a ton, not hitting much, only one home run. He struggled hitting in that ballpark in general in Brooklyn. So maybe this is just get him out of there. Maybe they just feel like he can get challenged by AA pitching and he's okay. He's up for it. But that was a little bit of a surprising promotion. So again, I'm going to try to spend a segment on that at some point this week. The other one, though, it's a little surprising how quickly they're fast tracking him, but not surprising that he got the promotion and that he's ready to face AA competition. Brandon Sproat up to AA. He's been great in high A so far this year, was dominating that competition. He is ready to face more challenging hitters. And I think he'll probably stay in AA all year. I would doubt that we see him in AAA, but that's where he's going to develop the most, is in AA all year. So that's really exciting. Brandon Sproat has every chance to be the Mets' best pitching prospect by season's end. It's either going to be him, Blade Tidwell, or Jonah Tong, and all three of them might be in the Mets. Well, I believe all three of them will be in the Mets' top 10 prospects by the end of the season. And I wouldn't even be surprised if they're all getting close to that top half, if you see two of those guys in the top 5, depending on graduations and everything else. But longer show today, so I'm going to sign off until tomorrow. We will be potentially talking about Clifford if I can get that data. We'll be breaking down the first game of Mets versus Phillies, and we'll be full go throughout the rest of this week. Excited to see what this first matchup against the Phillies holds. If you don't want to miss out on any of the episodes and you are listening on the audio side, make sure that you are following, rating, reviewing wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Trying to make a push to 9,000 subs. We've already crossed over 8,500. So I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe and try to get us closer to that goal of 9,000. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, be part of our texting service where you get lineups sent to your phone each day. You can be part of our giveaways and all the other inside access. You can find a link in the episode description. You can follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports, especially right now with the NBA playoffs and the NHL playoffs going on. You want to check out Locked On Sports Today. You can also find it on your Amazon Fire TV channels. And again, it is streaming 24/7 on YouTube.